What's up, everybody? Hopefully you guys are doing good as always. Today we're looking at the Mortimer Trap, which is played in the Berlin defense in the Roy Lopez opening. So let's go ahead and begin. We'll look at, of course, how to lay out the trap and how to play the trap, but also what to do if your opponent doesn't fall for it, because far too often people find a trap, they try it in a game, and then their opponent doesn't fall into it, and they're left in a terrible position and they don't know how to continue. So we'll also look at what to do if your opponent does not fall into the trap. But you're playing as black. This is a trap from the black pieces. We have e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to b5, and now knight to f6, the Berlin defense. Here, very oftenly, white will simply castle and get their king safe. But in this specific trap, we're looking at if they play d3, which is also a very intuitive move to play. Of course, you want to get out this other bishop once your bishop is kind of developed. And so very commonly also d3 is a move that white might play here. And in this position, you play a very weird move, knight to e7. And now you've laid out the trap. If white takes the free pawn, which is kind of the hook for the trap, you leave this pawn here on e5 undefended by moving the knight. So if they take it, well, they're going to lose either the knight or the bishop with a beautiful move, c6. Notice that because white here decided, instead of castling, to play d3, not only is their king still in the center, but they've also opened up this diagonal that black is going to use to attack. And so what happens is after you move the knight and they take, you play c6, and regardless of where the bishop moves, it can move to a4 or to c4. You have queen to a5 winning the knight because of this fork. And actually, if they move to a4, once you play queen a5, not only can you take the knight, but if they move their knight, say, to d2, then you can also take the bishop. Both are completely winning here for black. Of course, the only thing to be careful of is if they move their knight to c3, they are defending the bishop. So in this case, you definitely want to take the knight here. And so this is kind of the main idea in the trap, but there's a lot of important things to say. First of all, they can try to counter trap you because there's a really cool line here, knight to c4, and a lot of times you will blindly take the bishop here, and it seems normal to do so, but what you've noticed, or what you should notice, is that your king here is left with absolutely no space to roam. So knight to d6 is actually checkmate. And so when they play such a move as knight to c4 in this position, you want to be very careful not to blindly take the bishop, but instead in this position you can simply play knight to g6, still attacking the bishop. And if the bishop moves to a4, notice that you do not want to play queen to a5. That is kind of the common move here to win the pieces, but not only is the knight defending the square, but also even if they miss this, they can play knight to c3 to guard their bishop. So you do not want to go queen to a5, but instead, as you might have noticed, there's this very nice b5 fork still winning one of the minor pieces. And so beware that if they play knight to c4, simply move out your knight, and you're still going to win the bishop. If they move the bishop, you have b5. The last thing before we end the video that I just did want to talk about is what happens if they decline this trap, because often if they decline the trap, you don't know how to continue. I mean, your position does look kind of messy here. Knight moving to e7 looks like a very strange move. It traps in this bishop, and in general, your development might be delayed. And so you definitely want to know how to continue if they do not take the pawn here. And so let's suppose that they just simply castle. In this position, you always want to move your knight to g6, not only defending the pawn, but also letting out your bishop, and therefore you can castle soon. Also, the knight on g6 is very well placed here. In the future, f4 is a very nice outpost that it could come to. Of course, currently that's not possible, but in the future that could be a possible idea. And in general, the knights on g6 and f6 are quite well placed. And so how would this continue? Well, let's say they develop their knight. You can simply go bishop e7. And sometimes they might look to play a move like d4 because you are a little bit behind in development, so they might want to open up the center, but this shouldn't be too scary. You can simply take the pawn, and they'll take it back, but again, you can castle very quickly and everything should be fine. So instead of d4, let's say they decide to just develop their bishop, you castle, and now they play d4 again. You shouldn't be too worried about this, but let's say they just move the rook in. One last final move that I highly recommend you play in a position like this is taking advantage of this bishop on b5. And this bishop on b5, you can play c6, the bishop has to move somewhere, and then d5. So you kind of win tempo and get a very strong center. And you can do this, these two moves kind of together at all points. So here, instead of castling, once they move their rook instead, or with their bishop, instead of castling, you can very easily play c6. And even moving back, instead of developing your bishop here, you can still play c6 and go for this idea of going for d5. So at all times, you always want to be thinking, maybe I should play c6. Maybe I should play c6 and d5 so this bishop also can get developed. And so that's kind of going to wrap up the video for today. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully this video will give you all the information you need to go ahead and try out this trap in your own games. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you guys subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.